Welcome into the Rock Talk studio, where I find you that next great rock and roll story. For fans who want more than the music, here comes the books, the docs, and all that great rock and roll history behind the music. I'm your host, Big Rick. Let's plug in and take a look at the biggest rock and roll movie released in 2025. So have you seen it? Did you go out and check out Springsteen's Deliver Me From Nowhere, the new biopic, the most highly anticipated movie of 2025? That's what we're going to be talking about today. If you had to name one record that defines Bruce Springsteen, what would it be? When Springsteen was asked that, he said, if I had to pick one album and say that it's going to represent me in 50 years, I'd pick Nebraska. That was from Springsteen. And that answer really surprised me. I thought about it for a while, and to me, I've got to say it's Born to Run. That is the album that defined him. That defined his sound. It expanded on his cinematic storytelling. It was a big sound. It was grand. It was sweeping, romantic. He had anthems on that record. To me, that is who Bruce became. Nebraska, on the other hand, is an oblique, dark piece. And when thinking of Nebraska, I don't think there's really any other artist or band out there who was on the cover of Newsweek and Time, who was popular and was growing in popularity, just had a number one single with Hungry Heart off the River record, that double album, and then went in a completely, totally different direction. To me, there's only a couple artists that come to mind when I think about, who hit the e-brake that hard. I remember when Neil Young put out the Trans record. That was in 1992, which is crazy because Nebraska was also released in 1982. But remember that Neil Young record, that Trans record? Neil went from rootsy folk rock to a vocoder with heavy electronic experimentation on that record. Complete curveball that confused many of his fans and his record label. That was a weird one. And then, of course, the Bob Dylan follow-up to Blonde on Blonde with John Wesley Harding. That album, real stripped down and real subdued, almost like a country folk record. And you have to put Nebraska in those stories. Nebraska was brave, and it was a bold move. It was another pivotal time for Bruce and for his record label, who was ready and predicted correctly when they said his next album was going to completely explode his career. But Nebraska was a dark record made at a dark time in Springsteen's life. And this film, this new biopic, is based on a tremendous book called Deliver Me From Nowhere from Warren Zanes about the making of that Nebraska record. I fell in love with that book when it first came out. It was actually my book of the year in 2023. Every year, at the end of the year in December, I do my Book of the Year awards, and that one was my easy choice 2023 Book of the Year. It's a tremendous read. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. If you've only seen the film and not read the book, I would recommend going and checking out this book. Really, really well done. And I was really kind of fired up about the biopic when I heard it was based on the Warren Zanes book. I'm not the biggest fan of biopics. I did like the choice of Jeremy Allen White as the actor, but when they said it was about Deliver Me From Nowhere, okay, I was in. How are they going to pull this off? That's what I was thinking. How are they going to put all that was happening with Bruce at the time? And a lot of it, what was going on, was in Bruce's head. How could that work on film? The book does a great job of documenting how Bruce was struggling with mental health issues, a point that is covered in the film. But to me, here's where I struggled with this movie. You kind of get the idea that Bruce is struggling with something. They use really cool black and white flashbacks to tell the story of Bruce growing up, particularly focusing on the troubled relationship he had with his dad. And that does add to the story, no doubt. There is even a love interest in this film. Springsteen himself actually agreed to have this added to the story, though there was not really one person that it was based on. So that they kind of added that to the script. And the actress who played Springsteen's girlfriend in this, Odessa Young, she does a really good job. I really liked her part. And what she stands for in this is, the possible domestic side of life that Bruce could have had. She was very caring, very grounding, and it was difficult for Bruce because he was being pulled toward his creative side and his muse. And though it does show how Bruce is having a hard time, there's still not enough to draw you into his plight. I think that is what is lacking here for me in this movie. It didn't draw me in enough. There really is no big buildup or climax to the film. It wasn't reaching towards something. And I think that's so important when you're storytelling in a movie. Nebraska was made from a cassette of recordings that Springsteen made in a house where he lived by himself in New Jersey. And to be able to get the sound on that cassette, that famous cassette with no case, they had to come up with some really out-of-the-box ways to make it happen. And though they do show it in the film, it just lacked tension. And maybe because I know, and most people know, that if you're a Springsteen fan, how this is going to end up and what was coming next, the Born in the USA album, to me, that's the movie. That, to me, would have been the movie. You would have took the Nebraska part and built it up and showed that Springsteen was having issues with mental health, that he kind of had a little nervous breakdown, and then he overcame that and turned it around and made Born in the USA. That's the movie. That's the movie I wanted to see. How was this guy who was so depressed and having so much trouble with anxiety suddenly dancing with Courtney Cox and looking like the happiest guy in the world and selling more records than he ever sold and ever will sell? Nebraska was a dark time for Bruce, and he had to come through that and overcome and then transform himself in his career. That is so Bruce. And to me, that would have made a great payoff when he does overcome and launch his career into the stratosphere with the release of Born in the USA. Let's take a little left turn here and talk about the actors. I do want to mention that and talk a little bit about Jeremy Allen White and his version of Bruce, which to me took a little getting used to in the film, but he's very convincing in capturing Bruce's tone and intensity and sensitivity. I really like that. And like Timothée Chalamet in the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, Jeremy Allen White actually sings in this film. And like Chalamet, he is incredible. That is really, got to give him that. It's really one of the highlights in the movie. You know, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but his performance in the studio, there's a song he does in the studio. This song really showed how much White did to transform himself and push himself to sing like Bruce. That was a really highlight in the movie to me. And I have to mention Jeremy Strong as John Landau, the producer, manager, friend of Bruce in this. I thought he was tremendous in this movie. Actually, my favorite parts of the movie were him and his interaction with Bruce. Especially, I've got to mention this, especially after just reading Tonight in Jungleland, The Making of Born to Run. That book came out a couple months ago. Really good look at Bruce, where he was at coming into his third album. And it really shows how much John Landau played a major part in Bruce's career and the friendship that they formed. And you can see it in this movie. So if you want more about John Landau, check out Tonight in Jungleland, The Making of Born to Run. That's a really cool book. So overall thoughts, supporting characters and relationships to me lacked depth and emotional impact and just didn't do enough to elevate the story. The E Street Band, for instance, is in the film, and they play live in concert and a few studio sessions, but none of them speak. And if I remember from the book, it was little Steven Van Zandt, who actually was the one who tells Bruce he needs to put out the cassette version of Nebraska. That was a major part and a major push for Bruce that's not covered in this film. And I know you can't cover everything in the film. That would have been really tough to have, Clarence Clemens talking or little Steven talking. That would have been opened up a whole other can of worms. So they were kind of stuck with what they could do there. So am I recommending this film to you? Let's take a quick break. And when I come back, I'll give you the verdict. As the year winds down, we're starting to get into the holidays, and people are always asking me for suggestions for holiday gifts. And one thing I always tell them is, hey, check out the archives of the show. We're up to over 90 episodes now, 90 recommendations, 90 really cool rock and roll books and documentaries to choose from. So if you're looking for a cool gift for this holiday, anybody who likes rock and roll always loves a good rock and roll book, right? I know I do. In the archives, you've got plenty to choose from, a lot of great recommendations, or you can always email me, info@rocktalkstudio.com, and ask me personally for something. I'll hook you up, no doubt. Or you can get on my mailing list for my newsletter. It's called the Rock Talk Studio Blast. I send it out once a month, the last Friday of the month, and it completely covers the world of rock and roll books and documentaries. I've got a top 5 list that I have accumulated over the year that gets updated anytime new stuff comes out. And I got to tell you, there's a couple new books that just jumped into the top 5, couple of new things right here at the end of the year. You've got a list of all the new releases. All the dates are in the newsletter. If you want that, there's a link in the show notes to this show It says sign up for the Rock Talk Studio Blast subscription here. Click the link. The subscriptions are free right now to the end of the year, so you can get that there. But if you want a suggestion for a good rock and roll book, jump into the archives. All right, let's do a couple final thoughts on Deliver Me From Nowhere. This film is ambitious, and I like that it just focused on the Nebraska period instead of a career-spanning thing. I like that it felt like it was trying to do something different. It's quieter. It's a more internal look at Springsteen's creative process. It just doesn't quite land as a compelling enough narrative. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no climax. There's no buildup. You're not going towards something. And in a movie setting, I think that's really important. And I think that's where it missed a little bit here. If you're a Springsteen fan, which I consider myself one, I've been a pretty big Bruce fan. I grew up back east, Born to Run. When Born to Run came out, that was a huge moment in my life. The first time I saw Bruce was on the River Tour. They were on fire, and I was converted. So I think Bruce fans will like it. Knowing all the history of this turning point and this haunting recording, I think there's enough here to be welcomed. Somebody not familiar with Bruce, I mean, most know who he is, but I would really be interested in what they think of this film, because in no way can I speak about that in that sense, because I'm a Bruce fan and I know so much about him, and then I know so much about Nebraska. But if you went in and didn't know about that, it's an introspective film. It's a subdued film, kind of light on big dramatic points and big dramatic turns, but something that is very well acted and well filmed and put together. And I think you would like that film from that aspect. Overall, I have to say, I was a little disappointed with it. It didn't move me deeply, which I was hoping for. I think they missed it. I think they missed the mark on this one ever so slightly. Thankfully, we have the great book, Deliver Me From Nowhere by Warren Zanes, to fall back on. Coming up next week, there is a great new rock and roll book out, and it has jumped into my top 5 list instantly since it's released. I just read it. I can't wait to talk about it. And the thing about this book is it's mainly about a period of time when the author was 15 years old. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love talking rock and roll with you. If you want more great rock and roll stories, remember those archives. They're there. They're free. You can find yourself a lot of great, really cool rock and roll books and documentaries to check out. All right, let's tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. I'll catch you next time in the Rock Talk Studio.